So I was literally just going to say, if you normally see me up the front, I'm normally trying to get this one to stop invading the stage, or attached to my leg, or a baby strapped to me. But that's just the phase of life we're in right now. Welcome this morning. If you're new, if you're visiting, an extra special welcome to you too. We're going to pray this morning, so if you'd all like to pray with me. Lord, this morning we want to lift up the people to you who are waiting. Those who are waiting I'm going to start again. This morning, Lord, we want to lift up the people to you who are waiting. Those who are waiting in anticipation for test results, who are waiting for surgery, treatment, diagnosis, waiting for full recovery. In this wait that feels like a lifetime, surround them and their families with protection and understanding. For those who are waiting to see family, from near or from far. For those who are waiting to welcome their new babies. Lord, we pray for safety and good health for them all. We pray for young people waiting to do their prelims and exams. Bring them peace in the anxiety of expectation and to know that they are loved. For those who are just waiting to feel safe, caught up in war, displacement, abuse, mental health struggles. Lord, surround them with support and community, hope where it feels like there is none. God, we pray for those who are waiting to know what the next step is. In family life, in work, in personal life. Take away any loneliness and confusion from this feeling of waiting, and surround them with the love and knowledge that you are on that journey with them. We're going to take a moment to reflect and pray for those people in our lives who are waiting in any way. Thank you that you are such a loving God. We say, Lord, we wait on you, but you're already there in every situation. Open our eyes to you and to the others around us in need of someone to walk with. Together we say the Lord's Prayer. The words will appear on the screen. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our debts, as we forgive our debtors. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory.
Hi again. Later this week, I am hoping to go down to a big city. Got an image, I believe, of the city. And when I'm in a city, which doesn't happen all that often, I find myself laughing at myself as I walk down the street. Because what I do by default, walking down the street, wherever I am, is that I nod and I smile at everybody I pass. And that's because I've grown up or spent an awful lot of time in a small town or village where either I do actually know most of the people in the street, or there's a fair chance they know me, and so it's best for me to nod and smile anyway, just in case I should know them. And by default, I do that wherever I am, so I have to catch myself often in the big city because I often get strange looks from folk who, it turns out, I don't know every third or fourth person walking down the street. And yeah, I'm not a huge extrovert, I'm not mad as far as I know. So I just laugh at myself when I catch myself doing it. I wonder what the most difficult thing is about growing up in a small town or a village. Is it a lack of things to do? Is it there's not enough fast food outlets? Is it that the food delivery services don't come? Is it that Wi-Fi isn't strong enough? I wonder if it's actually, for a lot of young people, the fact that everybody seems to know you, which is great when everything's going well, or if you do something that you've achieved something and everybody gets to know about it and they congratulate you on it. But it's not so great if you make a mistake, or you do something that's at the very least embarrassing, maybe even more serious than that, because either it is the case that everybody knows, or it feels like everyone knows. And either it is the case that everyone remembers, or it feels like everyone remembers. And maybe you go away, maybe you live somewhere else, maybe you have all sorts of other adventures and achievements, but then you come back home and you still feel that everybody just remembers that set of actions that you're known for. Jesus of Nazareth grew a reputation. What we know about his public life, if you like, is only about 3 years. And he lived in a tiny scrap of country about the same size as Wales in Israel. And he never left there. Yet he gained a reputation. And as we read the stories that are collected for us about his life and his death and his resurrection, his reputation, despite starting off in a small town, spreads quickly. And as his reputation spreads, in this book called Luke that we're working our way through, as he travels around in the north, someone invites him to a meal. Next slide. A Pharisee, we're told by Luke, invites Jesus of Nazareth to come and have dinner with him. Now, a few quick things to explain. First of all, it's easy to assume in these stories, especially if you've heard them secondhand, that it's kind of a hero story, that Jesus is the hero and there are a set of enemies, the Romans and the Pharisees. The Pharisees are the bad guys and Jesus is the good guy. It's nowhere near as simple or clear as that. In actual fact, the Pharisees thought and felt an awful lot of the same things that Jesus himself would have taught and felt. Some people think he may even have been from a sort of Pharisee line of thought. The Pharisees weren't an official group. The Pharisees were just a movement that felt a certain way about their Jewish faith. They felt that their Jewish faith had forgotten all the kind of ways of living that their God had told them in their scriptures, in the first 5 books in this collection. And that if only people remembered who their God was and followed these instructions, then God might act and help them to be the people they were made to be. So they didn't like people who broke the rules, and they did have a focus on the rules and commands. In fact, they actually added their own ones as well. But there were all sorts of different kinds of people who had this Pharisee way of thinking. Anyway, this particular Pharisee is at least curious enough to invite Jesus to dinner. Maybe he wants to give him the benefit of the doubt, maybe he wants to hear more about what he's saying. Certainly a lot of the Pharisees were suspicious of the kinds of things Jesus was saying, because he didn't seem to be focusing people on just keeping the rules. He invites him to dinner, which in their society, everything you did was done in public. You didn't do things on your own, and you certainly, when you invited someone like Jesus to dinner, the doors and the windows were left open. We have to keep our doors and windows open today for health reasons, but there they were kept open for folk to see what was going on, and occasionally people would wander in and out. So the fact that there are people watching and somebody comes in isn't entirely unusual. What is unusual is that a woman comes into the house, and these events were mainly for men, so that is a surprise. Next slide. A woman, we're told, who has a reputation for, the phrase is, living a sinful life. Lots of commentators, lots of people who speak about this story will tell you what this woman's history is. They are assuming that. There's nothing in these stories that tell us what this woman's background was. And often I think we come with it tells a lot about us, what we project into these stories. But whatever her background was, she's come in, which is unexpected, and she comes in with a jar of perfume. She doesn't say anything, but what she does is shocking in the ancient Near East and in a Jewish home, despite it being in public. Next slide. First of all, she comes in and she stands really close to Jesus. In the ancient Near East, you would have been reclining on your side around about the table, taking your food. And she goes to his feet, and then she wets his feet with her tears. Now, she doesn't come in and purposefully wet his feet with her tears. The reason that there are tears is because she is overcome with emotion. So much so that her tears overflow and wet his feet. And that her intention is to do something with his feet. She then has to clean them before she can do what she wants to do. And she uses her hair to do that, which is deeply shocking in a Jewish situation, because women would not unbind their hair except alone with her husband or in a time of mourning. And so this is either shocking or scandalous in different ways. But she doesn't care. She wants to just clean his feet so she can do what she came to do, which is to put nice oil, perfume on his feet, which is incredibly unusual. That's the kind of thing you did for your guests, and put it on their head, not on their feet. And also dealing with someone's feet is something that would happen. Slaves would do that. Slaves and servants washed your feet after a journey. So this is all incredibly unusual and shocking, but she doesn't seem to care. She's so overcome. Now, lots of people would have been thinking lots of things about her, and we get to hear what Simon is thinking. Next slide. Luke writes, when the Pharisee who'd invited Jesus saw this, he said to himself, well, that's the English translation we get. What it actually says is he thought to himself. He said inside his own mind. Now, before we get to hearing what he thought, any Jewish listener hearing this story read out, trying to wrestle with what it meant to follow this Jewish Jesus movement, would immediately see a signal in what Luke is writing that something is wrong here. Because as I said, in a Jewish community, in Jewish faith, in Jewish social life, everything is done collectively. You don't make decisions by yourself. You do it with your family, with your tribe, with the kind of people that you're spending time with out on the market. You're talking about it all the time. Nobody makes decisions by themselves. Nobody speaks to themselves. Nobody thinks to themselves unless they're doing something suspicious, unless they're plotting someone. So when Simon says he thinks to himself, Luke tells us that Simon is thinking to himself. Immediately people are suspicious. Who thinks to themselves? Everybody thinks collectively. Then we get to hear what he is thinking. And his concern is that Jesus is not who he hoped he was. The hope was that he was a prophet, somebody with inspiration, some insight from God who could tell them back what God wanted them to do. And instead, if Jesus is having anything to do with this woman, one, he should have a special insight to know what kind of woman she is, and everybody knows her reputation. And two, he should know that what Jewish people should do is keep anybody like that away from them, because that was the Pharisees' way of thinking. Keep yourself pure. Anything that gets away from that has to be kept at arm's length. Next slide. And the next slide. And the next slide. Jesus speaks. Simon hasn't actually spoken, but Jesus knows what he is thinking, which immediately answers one of his issues, whether Jesus is a prophet or not. And then Jesus speaks, but instead of speaking straight away to Simon about what he's thinking, he tells a story. And Simon, to be fair to him, says, "Tell me, teacher." So there's at least some sort of recognition in there that he might learn something, although whether that's true or not, we can't really tell. And Jesus then tells a story about two men, or two people, who owe money to a moneylender. And the moneylender decides to cancel their debts. Next slide. One owes 500 denarii and one owes 50. Just for reference, one denarius represents a day's wage. So there's a considerable difference between the two debts. But in any case, the moneylender cancels both. And then Jesus asks, next slide, he asks, which one, Simon, will love him more? And Simon grudgingly replies, well, I suppose the one who had the bigger debt. Forgiven. Now, when I first heard this story, I focused very much on the two men and the size of their debts. And I decided that one debt was worse than the other debt, and that was part of the focus of the story. But in that I missed something in this little story that Jesus tells. It's a parable. It's a story that illustrates something. Jesus kind of invented parables in a lot of ways. Next slide. What Jesus said in the story is that neither of them had the money to pay back. This is not a story about getting into debt and it being terrible that you can't repay your debt, and then one had a small debt and they could repay it, one had a big debt. This is a story about two people, neither of whom had the facility to pay back their debt. Neither had the capacity, neither deserved anything because they couldn't pay back their debt. And paying back of the debt by this moneylender who, okay, we're trying to guess here that maybe this represents God in the story, doesn't have to cancel the debt, but does cancel the debt as a gift. So this is not about who deserves anything. This is about forgiveness and about, Jesus says, gratitude. Next slide. The woman is still there. Simon's grudgingly answered, saying, the person who had the biggest debt cancelled will love the person who forgives them the most, will have the most gratitude. And so then Jesus turns towards the woman, and in doing that, I guess he forces Simon to turn towards the woman, and he asks a question. He says, do you see this woman? And immediately, I again want to jump to what Jesus is going to say about what the point of his parable was. But I wonder if Jesus is asking a deeper question here when he says to Simon, and he says to me, do you see this woman? Or maybe, what do you see when you see this woman? Do you see her past? Do you see the actions she has chosen? Do you see the mistakes she has made for whatever reason? Or the life she has led for whatever reason that she's got into? Is that what you see when you see her? Or do you see this woman today? Do you see who God sees today? Next slide. He then goes on and he challenges Simon. Next slide. He points out to Simon all the things that in actual fact Simon has failed to do as the host. He hasn't offered Jesus any water to wash his feet. He hasn't anointed Jesus' head with oil. He hasn't done any of the customary things that a Jewish host would do. Simon has been so concerned about maybe doing this in public or about worrying about this woman and what she has done, the fact she might infect this social gathering. Next slide. Jesus listed all these things, and then what he expresses is that what this woman has done is not infect the situation. What this woman has done has been a huge, overwhelming, powerful expression of love. Love because she understands that she's not defined by everything she has done. Instead, she is forgiven. That she puts her faith in a God expressed in this man, Jesus of Nazareth, who doesn't look at her and see what she has done, but instead sees who she is and who she was made to be, and has taken away everything that gets in the way of that. Next slide. The guests then start to mutter, because anyone who stands up and says someone is forgiven is putting themselves in the place of their God, who is the one who forgives. And Jesus knows that, and he challenges everyone's assumptions when he says to the woman, your faith, your trust in this reality has saved you, and now go in peace. And that word shalom means in wholeness, with your relationships restored, with everything that gets in the way taken away. And you put your trust in that, and the rest of us, we might not see who we now really are, but God does. This woman trusts that nothing in her past defines who she is or who she can be, regardless of what anyone else might think. Next slide. What matters is, I believe, that this story is a story of a God of overwhelming, generous love and forgiveness, not a story about how to follow the rules to behave to get a reward. And what matters is the woman's response, is my response to that, which is, in this case, overflowing love and gratitude. And that means that when I walk down the street